Is Vim motions really the fastest way to programming? Like, I don't want to say that you program faster because you use Vim motion, but when it comes to real programming, you don't always have to be typing really fast, okay? For me, it's about how easy it is to edit the text. Anything from programming to note-taking or blogging, or maybe even writing a text draft, explaining to your girlfriend about why you forgot about the anniversary. Yeah, and I remember how much I struggled to learn Vim motions back in the day, but now I do feel like an advanced being when I'm writing text. So if I was brainwashed, turned into an NPC like Neo, this is probably how I would learn it all again. So there are three main modes that you're going to run into in Vim. So the first one is the mode that I'm currently in right now, which is the normal mode. And then we have the visual mode, which is just for like selection and stuff. And then we have the insert mode, which then allows you to start typing something in Vim. So in normal mode, you usually don't really type anything. You just move around with the default Vim arrow keys. And these are the default arrow keys that you have to get used to. There's just no other way around it. H is like the left arrow key, J is like down, K is up, and then L is right. And this part can obviously take time to get used to. So if you want to go through that really fast, I would recommend you trying out the different type of Vim games that you can play. And then that should help you get that muscle memory for the new arrow keys in as fast as you possibly can. Also in Vim, the letter cases usually define the motion. So for example, if you have a lowercase letter, it does one thing, and the uppercase letter usually does the opposite of that. And this goes for almost every motion inside Vim. To go from normal into insert mode, you can use I or A. So lowercase I just puts you into insert mode before the cursor, but A puts you into insert mode after the cursor. For capital I and capital A is essentially very similar. So capital I puts you into insert at the start of the line. So that would be here. And capital A puts you into insert at the end of the line. From insert mode, you can also hit the escape key to get out of insert mode. For me, I have my escape key just mapped to Control C. So later on, you can go ahead and map the escape key to JJ or JK or whatever else you like. Hitting O puts you into a new line straight into insert mode, and hitting capital O puts you onto the line above straight into insert mode. You can also use V for visual selection and then the normal Vim arrow keys to highlight and select text. If you hit capital V, that selects like the entire line, and then you can keep going with H, J, K, and L. It doesn't really matter with H and L though, so like more of like J and K to select everything. Again, you can hit escape to get out of Control V. If you see me hitting a lot of Control C, don't be confused because I basically have my escape key mapped to Control C. And this is also a really important part that I haven't seen anybody really mention about it. So like being able to switch in and out of normal mode, visual mode, or insert mode, or like going back to normal mode really fast with the escape key is really important. That's why I said that you can then remap your escape key to something you're comfortable with, something that you know you can actually hit really fast. So you can get out of insert really quickly back to normal and start moving. This is actually one of the things that I struggled with as well because it requires you to have that muscle memory to always hit the escape key back from insert in order to start moving. I don't know if you know this, but Vim also has another mode called the replace mode, and essentially the replace mode just replaces the current character with a new one. So for example, I do capital R, that puts me into the replace mode right here. Then I can start typing something else. And again, you can hit escape key to, of course, exit the replace mode. So yeah. I also want to touch on the importance of deleting, pasting, and yanking because having a really good understanding of these three can help you learn Vim motions way faster. And yeah, from now on, I'm going to use the word yanking instead of copying, so don't get confused. When it comes to yanking in Vim, you can use Y to just yank. Like right now, I just hit Y and it does absolutely nothing and it's just like showing as pending. So yeah, that definitely won't work. Let's say my cursor is on the letter S right now, and if I go ahead and do YY to yank the whole line, my cursor is still on the letter S, but if I instead do a selection first and then yank, my cursor jumps all the way back to the start. And this is how it usually works. You could use YY or select and then yank. Like both of these are the same thing. But something to quickly mention is that when you yank something, you don't have to hit escape or do anything confusing to get out of yanking or what. Like you can just yank straight from normal mode and everything should still be fine. Some of you might think, do I need to yank? Once I yank, do I need to get out of some kind of mode, like visual selection? Do I need to get out of visual selection? No, you don't. If you want to use visual selection to yank, you can just select yank and it automatically puts you back to a normal mode and you can go on about your day. So yeah, just thought that would be important to mention. What you can actually do as well is capital Y, and capital Y yanks from the cursor to the end of the line. So let's say I'm on H right now and I do capital Y, that yanks from H to the end of the line. But then you can also go into the selection mode using V and then start selecting the words that you have here and then Y to then yank them. You can't just yank something randomly because then it'll just leave you at pending. So yanking is very simple. It's just all about selecting a certain text and then yanking it. Here's how yanking and pasting is related though. So if I go ahead and use V to select, Y to yank it like that instead of yanking the whole line, and I paste, you'll notice that it no longer pastes on a new line. And that's the normal Vim behavior that you need to understand. Even if I do capital Y to yank from the cursor to the end of the line, do P to paste, it will paste after the cursor. But if I do capital P instead, it's going to paste before the cursor. So for example, I'm on the letter S right now. If I paste, it's going to paste everything before the letter S. Even if you use YY, that yanks the whole line, right? When you paste normally, it pastes onto a new line. But then, if you yank the whole line with YY again, and you hit capital P instead, so capital P just pastes above the current line, as you can see here. So yeah, that is pretty much like the relationship between yanking and pasting. Now let's look at how deleting works in Vim. So if you delete something in Vim, it automatically copies that to the register as well. So you will be pasting the same thing that you deleted. That's just the default Vim behavior. All right, so you can use D to delete, but again, it's almost like yanking. You need to select something first and then D to delete. Or if you want to do it directly from normal mode, just like yanking, YY, you can do that directly from the normal mode. If you want to delete from the normal mode, you can just use DD and it deletes the whole line. You can also do the same thing like big V to select the whole line, D to then delete. You can just use whichever you like more. But here's the important thing that you need to understand. Because deleting yanks that to the clipboard as well, when you paste, it also works the same way as yanking and pasting. Deleting a whole line and then pasting that same thing adds it to a new line. Capital P, it pastes above the current line. If you delete a word and you decide to paste, it will paste after the cursor. If you use capital P, it will then paste before the cursor. So the same behavior also applies here for deleting and pasting. So like this is the key binding that I have, so that it doesn't yank to clipboard when I delete, both in normal and visual mode. So then I would have to hit something like leader D in order for it to not yank to clipboard. Now let's move on to some real motions. Using J and K is not the fastest way to move around in Vim. The fastest way to move around in Vim is to jump from word to word or character to character. What I'm trying to say is if you use W, you can jump to the start of every single word, and you can also use B to go back to each of the words. And you can use E as well to jump to the end of every single word. But there are issues when it comes to these kind of sentences that have weird characters or symbols between them. If you try to use the simple W, it gets stuck between those words. But if you try and use capital W instead, it will jump perfectly. The same thing for capital B and also for capital E as well. This I use a lot. You can think of like the uppercase ones as like the please jump to that character. Like you add like some sort of please to it. Because if you don't, then it gets stuck in between those weird characters. But yeah. We also have movements like $sign to go to the end of the line while still in normal mode. Also underscore to go to the start of the character. So for example, if we do $sign here, underscore goes to the start of the character. But if we do 0, that jumps to the start of the line. Before we run into the 3 characters combination, which is the most important part of Vim motions, it's important to understand all of this first. You can think of combinations like a way to skip different type of modes and actions straight into the result. This is the part where you start to combine everything I said in the video into one piece. It will usually be a 3-character combination that you're going to use, and this is when things get really powerful. So the character C in itself is a multi-action character. C stands for clear, basically. So when it comes to C, right, if you just randomly press C, it will just leave you at pending, just like the girl you texted. it doesn't really work that way. You could start by selecting a certain text and then use C to clear and put you straight into insert mode. Because that's what C does. It clears things out and then put you straight into insert. So for example, you could also do something like capital C, right? And capital C clears from the cursor to the end of the line. There you go. So that's how C and capital C works. So it's good to understand that C is basically a multi-action character that does two things at the same time. So that you don't have to sit here, select, and then delete, and then I to insert something. You could just use C to quickly do that, especially when you combine C with the 3-character combination, which I'm going to show you in a bit here. It's actually one of my favorite things in Vim Motions because it allows you to edit text super fast. You can also use a 2-character combination as well. So for example, you could do something like $$ to select till the end of the line, or $V_ to go to the first letter. $$ works as well. $Y$, and that yanks the whole line. There's also F and T, which in itself is a 2-character combination because it requires 2-character to work. Apart from the 3-character combinations, if you can master F and T as well, who knows? You might be even faster than the 3-eye atlas that is literally heading for our solar system right now. So let's say you want to jump to the letter S, you can do FS, and it jumps you there. If you hit semicolon again, it will jump you to the same letter over and over. If you hit comma, it goes backwards. For capital F, it's essentially the same as hitting comma when you do FS. It just goes backward instead. So if I do capital F and then S, and I hit semicolon, it will then go backwards. You can get creative and do something like DFS, and that deletes from the start all the way to the letter S, including S itself. But when it comes to T though, T is not the same as F. T only jumps to that character. For T, you could do something like TS and it puts the cursor right there. And it's the same thing as F, so you could use semicolon to repeat the same command and use comma to then walk backwards. You could also do something like DTK and that deletes till the letter K, or you could do DTS and leave S as it is. So F is jump to a character, but T is jump till a character. So let's take a look at these 3-character combinations, as that's the best way to understand what is going on. In a combo, we usually see 3 things, which are action, range, and target. All these 3 combined together forms a combination, although the terminology can be confusing at times. The most common keys you're going to see in the first character are usually C, V, Y, or D. Things like G capital U, GU for uppercasing and lowercasing, greater than sign, lesser than sign. For the second character, you would usually see things like I, A, capital W, W, F, or T. In this case, I stands for inside and A stands for all or around. For the third character, which is the range, the most common one you're going to see is like W and big W as well. Characters like parenthesis, squirrely braces, quote, double quotes, greater than, lesser than, colon, semicolon, P for paragraph, B and capital B for the brackets. Also, keep in mind that you might want to go and experiment this yourself so that you can understand which kind of combination is possible. So CIW, that basically clears everything out and puts me into insert. If we do have some weird symbols in between, like this word right here, CIW, that doesn't really clear anything, right? We want to clear this whole word. So I'm going to let you guess right now. What you can actually use is CI capital W. Same thing for V as well. You can use V as a combination as well. So things like VIW or VI capital W. The same thing for yanking as well. You can yank like a single word by just doing YIW. And if it contains weird symbol, then YI capital W, right? YIW, YI capital W doesn't make a difference if it doesn't have any weird symbols. Deleting also works with 3-character combinations. So you could do something like DIW or DI capital W, and it will also yank that to clipboard. So when you paste it, as you can see, there's also a way to use C even more effectively by just doing like CIB. That clears everything inside the parenthesis, or you can do CA capital B. So everything including the squirrely braces as well. So yeah, even VI double quotes or DI double quotes. These are just some of the things you can go and implement straight away. There are also two character combinations that you can hit very similar to the three character combination, like removing this whole word with CW and typing a new one in instead. DW also works. YW yanks that word. And again, even if you have some strange characters, you can hit C capital W, D capital W, Y capital W. Also, this might not be a motion, but just so you guys can see a clear picture of what's going on, if I want to indent this whole paragraph, I can actually just hit greater than AP, lesser than AP. A lot of the examples I showed before were pretty much horizontal movements, but let's take a look at some vertical movements as well. Although I do think the horizontal movement is more important. I mean, there's a lot more things in horizontal movement that you could do, and vertical movement isn't as difficult as the horizontal ones. So obviously we have the typical one that is GG to go to the top of the file or GO to go to the top of the file, then capital G all the way down. Then we have the typical scrolling, which is Control U to scroll up and Control D to scroll down. Although if you don't have this setting in your option to, center your cursor when you scroll up and down, then the cursor will obviously fling around everywhere. Also, when you hit the scrolly braces, you can notice that it jumps through the paragraph. I'm doing a closing parenthesis right now, and then an opening parenthesis goes downwards. I could be in this function right here, hit $, do percent to jump to the end of the function. And then I can jump back and forth just like that with the percent sign. We can then combine this with other motions such as a V for selection, percent sign to then select from that parenthesis all the way down here. Y percent sign, and that will yank everything inside the scrolly braces. Percent sign can work for any sort of brackets. I don't have to necessarily be in the parenthesis for this to work. I could be anywhere, hit percent sign, and it automatically jumps to the parenthesis as well. This is something that I use quite a lot. I know most of the time what we do is have relative line number turned on. Like for me right now, I do have relative line numbers on. And let's say I want to jump to line number 8. What I can do is 8J, and that jumps me down there. But most of the time, I don't actually really do that. I mean, I'm not comfortable doing that. I usually hit 1, 2, and 3 a lot. So I'll do something like 12K, 21K. If I want more than that, then I can just do like 33J. These three numbers, they're very close to each other and very easy to hit. And sometimes you're jumping like 10 lines up, 20 lines up, 30 lines up. Sometimes I think it's even more useful than doing control U and control D to just jump like 10-ish lines up and down. That is like a fixed line number when you scroll, but this, you're actually almost like filtering through the line numbers depending on how far or how much further you want to scroll. Let's say I want to change a parameter called triple G here. I can actually just search for that parameter, enter, then I can hit CIW to change that and type something else. Now I can hit escape to get out of there, but then my search is still working, so I can hit N to navigate through my searches, but if I hit capital N, it navigates backwards. In Vim, you can actually hit dot to repeat the same command. With N, I can still navigate through that, go to the word that I want to change, hit dot, N dot. That is also one way to replace the words. What if I was just typing something on this line and I notice a small mistake I made in the function below? Without having to exit insert mode into normal mode to start doing a motion, I can just hit Control O, 4J, and it takes me down directly into insert mode. But then I don't want to insert anything here. I want to change my parameter. So I can just hit Control O again, capital F, closing parenthesis, Control O to do some sort of motion, G, capital U, I, parenthesis, uppercases everything inside the parenthesis. And I notice another typo on the line below, so I can hit Control O, J, Control O, F, semicolon, and then start typing something in. I think I've said Control O like 20 times now, but hopefully you get the idea. If you have trouble remembering Vim motions, you can actually open up the Vim documentation and probably search for some of the motions and look at what it does. Go and read in the documentation. You can also open up the tutor documentation to read. This documentation will help you out a lot. If you find it hard to learn Vim motions, I just want to say that the more you use it, the better you're going to get at it. Being familiar with your keyboard can help a lot as well, so you don't have to always constantly look down for the keys that you want to press to do some sort of motion. You should never think that there's a right combination or a wrong combination because everyone works differently. Sometimes it's just two key presses away, but like that barely even matters. Like, come on. If that's the mindset that you have, then you're basically just limiting yourself from being blazingly fast. The way it transforms you, the way you write code changes. The way you take note changes. Everything changes, honestly.